Usually my typical line is that there will never be vampires on on the show Teen Wolf, but ask me that in 5 years when we've run out of ideas.
So here's the thing. I've seen this idea floating around recently that the one supernatural creature that Teen Wolf could really have used was vampires, and I want to explore that idea a little more. I'll try to make this quick since I'm nearly finished the season 4 video and I know you're all itching to see that, but give me a minute to cover this first. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're a fan of Teen Wolf. We're super close to 1,000 subscribers now and I really appreciate it. Historically, werewolves and vampires are pretty closely knit. As far as origins go, they aren't actually connected much at all, though. Very few mythological stories about werewolves and vampires have anything to do with one another, though there are some similarities between them. It wasn't until later years that the connection between werewolves and vampires expanded, and nowadays it seems to be absolutely everywhere, from Underworld to Twilight to pretty much any other supernatural teen show you can think of. In early stories about vampires, though, they could turn into wolves, and in some countries even include myths about werewolves turning into vampires when they die. A lot of older stories about both creatures tend to conflate their abilities with witches, so the specific information is a little bit vague and harder to track. As far as Teen Wolf goes, what could vampires add to the series that other creatures don't already add? I think it may have been interesting to continue that old tale that werewolves who are incorrectly killed will return as vampires, but I think the biggest reason we never see them in the show is because at the time Teen Wolf was airing, the supernatural teen genre was already overrun with vampires. Teen Wolf was created pretty much as a direct response to the popularity of movies like Twilight and shows like The Vampire Diaries, which both include werewolves but tend to put the main focus on the romance between the main characters and vampires. By not including the vampires at all, Teen Wolf actually had its chance to stand out. And again, what would vampires add to Teen Wolf that isn't already there? Vampires are undead and immortal, which I suppose none of them creatures in Teen Wolf really are, except maybe the Hellhound. But we already have a handful of other youthful, supernaturally strong creatures with our werewolves, the Wendigos, those Hellhounds, and so on. I just don't think that vampires are something that would add anything meaningful to the show. Beyond season 4, one of the main complaints people tend to have about the mythology of the show is that they don't spend enough time developing the new creatures. I'd say up until the Deadpool shows up in season 4, and we start to get a bunch of new creatures with the chimeras in season 5, the origins and capabilities of the various creatures are pretty well explored. Of course, we have multiple seasons about what werewolves can do, how they're made, their hierarchy and status, what they're weak to, how they work, and so on. The kanama in season 2 is an extension of this, since it comes from turning someone into a werewolf and their accompanying baggage changing the way they shift. We learn how the kanamas work, what they can do, and how you can quote-unquote fix them, even if they change their mind on this later and undo it. In season 3, we have the kitsune, which are a little more underdeveloped, but we still learn about how they're born and not made, how there are different types of them, how they're stronger the older they are, and so on. Were-coyotes and were-jaguars and such tend to be similar enough to werewolves, with a few extra abilities that are expanded on in the later seasons, with were-coyotes being able to slowly take power from their mother, and were-jaguars having the link with the berserkers. But some creatures that are introduced in the 4th season, like Wendigos, a handful of the ones used for chimera characters, druids, and more, are pretty much left completely undeveloped throughout the entire show. If I was continuing the series, I would probably lean a little more toward expanding the understanding of some of these supernatural creatures, rather than trying to add in a new one. If you really want to include vampires, you could probably overlap them a bit with the Teen Wolf version of Wendigos, since the only thing we really know about those is that they eat human flesh, which could be seen as an equivalent to vampires drinking blood. Teen Wolf has always tried to have interesting takes on supernatural creatures, like silver being the family rather than the metal that kills werewolves, or how rather than being influenced entirely by the moon, the shift is affected by strong emotions and anger as well. I think that if vampires were ever introduced into Teen Wolf, they would need to make them a different take than what we'd seen in other series and movies, which might be kind of hard to do. I would still say that blending it together with the Teen Wolf version of a Wendigo would be probably the most interesting thing they could do, since it would pretty much completely change how we see vampires, but if we're calling it a Wendigo, then it's not really a vampire. I don't know, I guess the point of this video is just to say I don't think Teen Wolf would really benefit from including vampires at all. I can't say it wouldn't affect the show negatively, but I just can't see a way where it would make the show better, which means I think it's probably for the best that it didn't happen. I plan on going more in-depth on all these supernatural creatures in Teen Wolf and maybe discussing a few that Teen Wolf could have used, so keep an eye out for that. I promise that the Season 4 video is next, and though I'm starting university again soon and will need to slow down a bit on how often I post videos, it will be out as soon as possible. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any topics for future videos that you'd like to see me cover, especially if it has to do with Teen Wolf, let me know in the comments below or shoot a message to my email inbox in the description. Until next time.